There's all sorts of different ways that dairy farmers are using innovation to be more sustainable. And what's amazing about sustainability, especially within dairy farming, is it's so different depending on where you're at in the country.
Hi, and welcome to On Purpose. Today, I'm joined by Tara Dussen, who is a fifth-generation farmer from New Mexico, an environmental scientist, an advocate for sustainable farming, and a very proud mom. So welcome, Tara. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great, it is great to have you here. I read that when you were little, you used to build hay forts on your farm in New Mexico, and reading that, you would think, when you were growing up, all you ever wanted to be was a milk farmer. Was that the truth?
I did love growing up on the dairy, but I do feel like classic rural kid. When I left for college, I just didn't think I wanted to come back to the farm. I didn't know if there was a place for me or what my role could be. And then I found a love for environmental science and realized I could come back to the dairy and be a consultant for dairy farms across our state and help them with all things environmental.
Talk to me about the role of innovation today in sustainable milk and dairy production.
When I was online as like a new mom, I was just seeing a lot of misinformation about sustainability and the environment. And so I really just started out wanting to share about dairy in general. Exactly like you said, it wasn't necessarily about what just our farm was doing, but it was what dairy industry as a whole was doing, what all farms were doing. So there's all sorts of different ways that dairy farmers are using innovation to be more sustainable. And what's amazing about sustainability, especially within dairy farming, is it's so different depending on where you're at in the country. So what sustainability looks like for me in New Mexico is going to be very different than what sustainability looks like for a dairy farm in Wisconsin.
Some of our listeners may know that water is a major issue in the Southwest, and some others might not be aware of how important that is and how critical water conservation is. So talk to me about how you manage water on your farm and why that matters.
Yeah, so water conservation is one of the biggest factors in our environmental sustainability story as far as New Mexico goes. We are in a drought. Water is really our limiting resource. So, there's practices that we implement in the barn. We actually recycle a gallon of water 4 to 5 times in our barn. And it goes from cooling the milk to cleaning the equipment to, flushing the lanes to ultimately watering our crops that are going to feed our cows. So it really comes full circle. And then also, outside of the barn, a lot of our water use goes to watering our crops that feed our cows. And so we are trying to use more drought tolerant crops. So crops that just need less water so that we can practice more dryland farming.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about dairy farming and sustainability?
There's lots of different myths out there. I think the biggest one is probably that people think dairy has a larger environmental impact than it really does, like as far as greenhouse gases go. So just explaining why that's not true and why, it's not an easy answer to just say dairy is sustainable. Like, you have to get into the nuts and bolts of it. And so taking people along that story and that journey helps convey that, dairy counts for about 2% of greenhouse gas in the United States. And that's because we do X, Y, Z to be more sustainable.
You really leverage social media to get the word out, to communicate where consumers are today. How did you make that transition from scientist to social media sensation?
About 6 years ago, so my oldest daughter was about 1.5, and I was joining all the mom Facebook groups, like classic millennial mom. I was like, well, what are people feeding their kids? So many times the conversation ended up around milk in these mom groups. And a lot of times when you would start talking about milk, I couldn't believe how much misinformation people were sharing about dairy's environmental impact. Like, I expected to see animal welfare. I expected to see nutrition. I didn't expect to see like sustainability be a part of that conversation in a mom Facebook group. And I was like, I need my own platform where I can share. And so originally I started with a blog, and that way I could share links and resources and, all of that. And ended up transitioning to Instagram and then growing from there.
So what do you think it is about your unique voice that is so resonating with people across social media platforms right now?
I just felt like a lot of people who were in charge of our promotion were, no offense, but they were older men who probably hadn't been to a grocery store in years, or they hadn't transitioned a baby at 1-year-old to cow's milk and what that looked like and what the ins and outs of it were. And so I really wanted to bring that voice to agriculture, that I was a young mom, I could relate to people. You got to be able to connect with your community to really be able to tell your story and tell it effectively.
Talk to me a little bit about where you think women are today in agriculture, their role and how it's evolving.
There's just this massive shift of like being recognized for the things they've always done and them taking on new, like very critical roles, with independence. I think we still have some catching up to do. I still know a lot of women who get told, well, where's your dad? Where's your husband? I want to talk to the owner, when lots of women are in that ownership and hands-on roles. So there's still work to be done, but I think we've come a really long way in just seeing the diversification of what women can do within agriculture and how they can support their operations.
Tara, I want to thank you for joining me, and first and foremost for the inspiration that I think you provide so many working moms, certainly across the U.S., as well as women in agriculture. It is really inspiring, and thank you for joining us for another episode of On Purpose. I look forward to seeing you next month.